Welcome to another episode of Women Investing in Women. Robin and I are super excited week after week to feature amazing women doing absolutely wonderful work around the world to invest in the community of women and lift each other up. And today is one of those conversations, and you are going to absolutely love it. A lot of times people feel that faith and politics and gender issues, we don't talk about it. They are quietly behind the scenes. And those tend to become the reasons why so much friction in society happens. And today we're going to be talking to two amazing women who are addressing all three from their spirituality and faith perspective to give a platform for women and give an opportunity for women to do what is right. So take it away, Robin.
All right. I am so excited to have Emma Addams and Jen Thomas on our program today. They're the executive directors of Mormon Women for Ethical Government. We call it MWEG, the initials. And in full transparency, I am a member of MWEG. And I'm also a part of the faith tradition that undergirds this organization, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, affectionately known as the Mormons, also known as Latter-day Saints. And so I'm so excited to have Emma and Jen here. And why don't you start out very briefly, just giving us just a quick, very short summary of what is Mormonism, and then how does that tie into why was MWEG created?
So I'm going to lean heavily into the second part of that because the scope of the tradition, the faith tradition, would take the time of the whole podcast. But essentially, the church was founded in upstate New York in 1830, so it's about 2 centuries old almost. But at this point, it is definitely a global church. The majority of the members of the church live outside of the United States rather than in. And it is an outthinking church, and it has always, from the very beginning, been a church that drew heavily, we believe in the Bible, and drew heavily on the tradition there, both in the Old and the New Testament, in combination with our additional scriptures, most famously known, the Book of Mormon, to look outward and see how members of our church could engage with and bless the world. It is a very outward looking, like I said, faith tradition, which is evidenced by our really comprehensive missionary program that sends thousands and thousands of young people out into the world every year to share the message and also to do a lot of service. How that relates to MWEG is, I think, really important. There's some very key elements of our faith tradition that we share with general Christianity, and then there's some that are unique to us. So some of the ones that we share are a deep, abiding belief in the value of every human soul, and a firm commitment to live our lives according to the 2 first commandments, loving God and then loving your neighbor as yourself. And so that idea that every soul is absolutely valuable and has the right to self-determination and is here on the earth to expand and to grow and to enjoy the full range of the human experience is one of the reasons that we as an organization are so committed to democracy, because we see that form of government as being the form that most allows for the rich growth of individuals and their self-expression and self-determination. I think the second element that is, I think, very important to us, that also we do share with many other faith traditions, is a very rich concept of what we call Zion, but it is evident in lots of other faith communities, sort of a desire to build a better society, and is politically very well reflected in the writings and teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King and his vision of the beloved community. So we are committed to democracy, because we believe in the importance of the human soul, and we are committed to building a better society because we believe that we have an obligation as Christians and as disciples of Jesus Christ to create an equitable and just society in which, again, all of us can live in harmony and happiness. And then the final thing I think I will add is one of the really important parts of our faith tradition has always been the real rich engagement of women. And that isn't something that we, I think, are traditionally known for. I think there's sometimes some inaccuracies around that. But from the very beginning of the establishment of the church, women were heavily involved in civic activities. They were heavily involved in political engagement, and they were some of the first women in the United States to cast a vote and be given the right to vote. And we are drawing as women on that faith tradition, on that belief that women have a role to play in our society in both building the beloved community, or as we call it, Zion, particularly in terms of temporal affairs, helping people to, live in spaces and places that are healthy and safe. And we see that play out in a lot of our advocacy work. So I don't know if that, like I said, it's a religion with enormous scope, but I think those are the things that we draw on most heavily in MWEG and are one of the reasons that we're here.
Beautiful. That is a wonderful introduction and gives our global audience a context and some real perspective from the organization that is driving the mission, especially to empower women and advocate for women. As I am listening to you, Jennifer, and based on our conversation earlier with you and Emma, what's coming up for me is, as you are focused on a two-pronged mission in your organization to give women the voice and allow them and advocate for them to have the proper representation in a democracy, at the same time empowering them and creating an avenue for public policy shaping. For me, I come from the country that gave the world the first female head of state in 1960. So women in government and empowered women is how I grew up. And as I am navigating the cultural shock for me being in the United States, believe it or not, what do you think is holding back women born and raised in the United States in speaking up for themselves, advocating for themselves, and putting their interests first? And the reason I ask this question is 51% of the United States population is female. If every one of us voted in our interest, we will have equal pay, we will have healthcare, we will have everything that is human rights for us. And yet we don't. So what drives that?
That is not a small question. And I think the answer is, again, one that we could spend a lot of time working on. I think I'll maybe narrow in our answer, speaking for the women that we work with and we represent in our organization. And I think I'll flip it a little bit and talk from the affirmative and talk about all the things that we see our women bringing to and the work that we're doing to make sure that they are empowered and given space and learning the skills to do so. So I think, there are, cultural forces at work at times that make it more complex for women to see themselves in power. I think the word power is one that is perhaps key to this conversation. We don't shy away from talking about power and defining it and talking about using it. I think historically there's been some reticence, and I'll speak directly to women of our faith, but I think this is probably broadly applicable to even like thinking about or reaching for power, because of the way that power is often exercised within government and within spaces where it's used as a method of coercion or manipulation. And so we find a lot of our women see that as kind of the model for leadership and the model for government, and don't want a part of that because they don't see themselves as that type of person who exercises power in that way. So a lot of the work we're doing is kind of flipping around and reimagining what we think is really the true definition of power, which is power that's used collaboratively, that's used with principles rather than through parties. I mean, we have the parties in the United States, which have really become the main power centers in order to exercise political power, and it's used in a very ideological, very narrow, very team-focused way. Like, we use our power to get the things we want for our people, and less of a holistic, what is good for the community, what is good for the nation. And so really doing a lot of, I think, thought work, and then internal work around, how do I think about power? What are the mistakes that I've made in envisioning it, and how can I transform the way it's used in my community and in my home and in everywhere else? So I think that is probably a key word. I think for us, if we're looking at like the solution, beyond the kind of the philosophical foundation I'm laying about power and about how to use it in a persuasive way, I think for us, it's the combination of the two missions that is the special sauce. And that's the kind of the long-term work that we're engaged in. I think the fact that the combination of the advocacy, so the thought leadership that MWEG is providing in a principled way, detached from party politics, so that women don't feel like they have to take a side. They're thinking holistically about the entire nation and all the people in it. And then attached to that, very specific skills building opportunities, so that when they do enter into the public sphere, they have both kind of the organization at their back, and they have specific skills and practice. So they might, through the advocacy side, learn how to write a letter to their legislator, because we've given a tool that kind of explains how to do it and gives lots of prompts, and we have information about the issue. And then they've done that a few times, and then they're ready to write a letter to the editor on their own. And they come back to us, and we can help edit it and such. And then maybe next, they're like ready to go give testimony in a public comment in a legislative session, et cetera. And then maybe they're ready to run for office. So I think sometimes we skip all that other layer, which is all of the civic work that is really important to building policy change, and we go straight to running for office. And so I think our model, what it really does is really builds that foundation of both the thought leadership and the principles, and then the women and the skills. And then we trust that women, given those opportunities, will make wise and good decisions for themselves about what the next steps are, what level of power it is that they would like to attain, what level of influence, and they see themselves in the other women in the organization as well. They have all of these examples. So hopefully that answers that question. Jenna, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think I would just add to the latter part of your question, was this question of, why don't women organize, since they are the majority, right? Why doesn't our government reflect us? And that is something that we are trying hard to accomplish at MWEG by focusing our advocacy work on issues that our women have told us are important to them. And I think that, just like Emma said, I think that there's sort of a vicious cycle in our society right now. Power is aggregated with the parties. The parties are mostly run by men. Then the policies and the patterns of behavior that come out of those parties are not necessarily appealing to women or meeting their needs, and women disconnect to some degree from party politics, and then that just makes it worse. And we're trying to reverse that cycle. So we're saying, hey, women, what interests you? What issues do you see as really relevant in your society? What policy solutions would craft a universe that you would be much happier living in? And then we are going to empower you and connect you to try to have those policy solutions realized. And by giving them a community to do that, and Emma expressed that, a community that is that allows them to do this work together, to support each other in doing it. And I think the other thing that is important to understand about our community is that we do not ever want to use our women just to achieve a policy objective. We always want to build our women in the process of achieving that policy objective. So if we get the legislation passed, at the end of it, we don't have 3,000 exhausted or 10,000 exhausted women. We have a bunch of women who are like, that was a great experience. I learned from that. I left with friends. I know things I didn't know at the beginning. I have skills I didn't have going into that. and they actually feel empowered to take the next step. So we spend as much time caring for our women and building their skills, that's the second part of our mission, as we do in trying to achieve the policy objectives. And those things are very much our yin and yang.
This is really amazing. I have to say, I am so proud of the answers that I've heard, and just really thrilled with all the answers you've given so far. I'm wondering if we can talk about, maybe give us a few specific examples of how has MWEG helped an issue or situation, specifically helped a situation that was specifically oriented towards women, or a woman, an example of a woman or a group of women or a women's issue that was specifically benefited because of MWEG's involvement in government.
Yeah, so we've got a lot, so I'm trying to narrow it down and think of a few different ones. I think a lot of our kind of legislative wins, I think, have been around pro-democracy work, which we absolutely see as benefiting women. It's a little bit of a harder, can be a harder connection to make, but let me try to make it with one particular piece called the Electoral Count Reform Act. Kind of in a post kind of January 6th world, there was, a lot of concern about what happens at the next election and how can we avoid the confusion around the roles of the vice president and others in terms of the election, the presidential election in the US. And we spent a lot of time researching and kind of figuring out what was it that we could throw our weight behind and what would be the most meaningful legislative work that we could do ahead in the aftermath of that, and then ahead of the 2024 election. And we chose kind of a fairly obscure and lengthy and difficult to understand law called the Electoral Count Act, and worked with a variety of organizations, policy organizations and such, to really make that at the forefront of our advocacy in 2022. And the connection that I think I want to make here is that ultimately what that did get passed, we worked really hard to get it passed. We spent a lot of time working with our women to help them understand why it was so important. And once they got it, they were like, aha, this is obscure. It seems very kind of wonky, but this is the most important thing we can advocate for in order to bring peace. Because what we're looking for is peace here. And so we're looking for a world in which the rules are clear, the rules of the election are harder to manipulate, harder for bad actors to come in and say, oh, I won, or you, or this person won. And that's, I think, a pretty solid example of a win that we had that really, really, really benefited women, but in a way that the connection, MWEG helped make that connection for them. And then once they got it, they were like, I'm all in on this. So that's one example. Jen, did you have another one to add?
Yeah, well, I just want to add to that. I think we know very clearly that women benefit in material, spiritual, social, all sorts of ways in a healthy democracy. And almost always their roles and rights are diminished the more we move towards authoritarianism, right? Societies that are highly controlling, they usually start by controlling women and giving them fewer opportunities. And just back to the original question, democracy is the best way for women to make their voices heard and to shape a society. And in the post-war America, we saw lots of wonderful policies that helped women and families. And we've seen, as our nation has kind of teetered a little bit more towards authoritarianism and less representation, we've seen fewer and fewer of those things enacted. And we've seen things like child poverty rise, all sorts of issues that affect women and children. And so, like Emma said, our first step has been helping women understand that if they want to have a seat at the table, the best way for them to do that is to pro-democracy. And then to add to that, I think there are a couple of things that we've been heavily involved in that have really allowed our women to come forward and use their voices. Some have been simply by doing regulatory work in Nevada and Arizona, where women spoke to regulatory bodies and worked on making sure that laws were passed that protected the environment for their families and children. We've had the opportunity to have women involved in campaigns to preserve access to contraception across the United States and states where that was threatened, which is really important. And most of the voices that have been speaking out on that from our organization are traditionally conservative voices. These are women that have children, that value families, but see contraception as very, very important to their ability to maintain health and the well-being of their family. And then I think the final thing that I would add that we are working heavily on right now, and did very much at the end of the last year, we tried to make sure that the child tax credit, which has done a remarkable job of lifting children out of poverty, was reinstated during the omnibus bill last year. We missed that opportunity, but we are working on it again right now in a bipartisan way, because we see that as a very low-hanging fruit that could instantly put money into the hands of some of our most disadvantaged and struggling families.
I love what I'm hearing, and I love the positioning that allows your organization and the women you are empowering to come from a bipartisan perspective to put the viability of democracy and peaceful existence first, because that's what we all want. So the question I have is, how can men and women outside of your faith be allies? We don't need to be in the faith to be allies and be supportive and share the resonance and amplify. How can we be a part of the movement and be a part of the solution? How are you getting this outside of the community too?
So I say the first thing is that, we have membership within our organization, which is limited to women, but beyond that, there's no limit. So we actually welcome, women who resonate with our mission, who are okay that most of us are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that we're faith affirming. We're not faith promoting, and that we're not going out there trying to, we're not doing missionary work in a formal way, but what we're doing is providing a space where women of our faith can feel like they can bring their whole self to the advocacy process. So I actually have lots of friends from college who aren't members of our faith who joined MWAG and have loved being a part of it. There are so many opportunities to share our work, on social media and support it in that way. We have some of our most ardent supporters are Catholic or come from other faith traditions who we've collaborated with on interfaith panels, and we've worked on interfaith documents and positions together. And so there's a lot of opportunity for us formally as an organization to be doing that. And then our individual members are doing that in their own communities as well. So I guess we would encourage, anyone who is interested in what they hear to follow along and or join if you feel so inclined. We don't want to be an exclusive movement in that respect. And then I would add that the other thing that we've been working quite a bit on this year in 2023 is Jen and I have been really expanding our list and table of collaborators and partnerships. So we have connected in with multiple interfaith organizations, as well as pro-democracy work, peace building. So we see ourselves as really, carving out. In fact, we don't even have to carve it out. We've so many invitations. We don't have to push our way in. We're able to really be kind of a representative of the women of our faith in those other spaces and be a strong voice for them, so that we can be represented in the pro-democracy and peace building worlds. So I think important to know is that it says Mormon in our name. Most of our members are Mormon, but we see our work as being incredibly collaborative with both the pro-democracy movement, and indeed it is, and the peace building and bridge building movements, and are always looking for opportunities to engage with and partner and collaborate with other people and organizations.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, this is also something that we draw heavily on our tradition from, in the sense that while we are openly Christian, we have not necessarily always been seen as such by many other Christian faiths in the United States. And we have a history of not always having enjoyed the full benefits of the Constitution that we should have. And so what that means, I mean this as a faith tradition. So what that means is, as an organization, we are deeply and profoundly committed to pluralism. We believe that pluralism lays the groundwork for peace, particularly in a multiracial multi-faith democracy. And that is why collaboration is so important to us, because we recognize that there are many, many good people doing this work across the nation. And by connecting with each other, amplifying each other's work, collaborating on legislation or policy, helping to define a new way of politics that is principled rather than partisan, there are millions of people literally across the nation interested in having a nation that reflects those values. And we have the opportunity to work together. I don't think the solution is one organization that is going to call all these people in under an umbrella. I think the organization is there are lots of thousands, maybe even, of affinity groups like ours that have principles at the core, that are pluralistic, committed to democracy, and have a desire to collaborate with one another. And I think that's how we get the work done in really healthy ways that continues to diffuse power and not aggregate it, which is what we want.
I am absolutely loving these answers. I know that MWEG has, if I'm remembering correctly, 4 pillars, 4 main pillars, objectives, one of those being peace building. And I wonder if you could tell us about those 4 pillars. And I know our time is zooming away here, but tell us about those 4 pillars, and particularly the peace building component of MWEG.
So from the very beginning, MWEG is exactly right, which there's 4 pillars that we have, we call them our core attributes or our core principles. And the first one is faithful. And that is that we're faith affirming, and that we are not affiliated with or endorsed by the church that most of us are members of, but we choose to affirm the faith and not use our power and advocacy to in any way try to change or disagree with or criticize the church or doctrines. The second one is nonpartisan. And for us, that doesn't mean we're neutral. We obviously take positions, and it doesn't mean that it's always bipartisan, but that we do have, are very thoughtful in our engagement, that it's based in principles and not in kind of party platforms. And then the third one is the peaceful one that Robin mentioned. And if, I guess one way to look at it is, if pro-democracy is the what of our work, peaceful is the how. So we are very intentional about how we engage in the public sphere as we're advocating for legislation, and we work very hard to train our members with the skills they need in conflict resolution, how to manage difficult relationships, how to be persuasive. So that is, it's both kind of high level philosophical, and that we are making a choice, kind of a choice as an organization to engage in a peaceful manner, but then we're also see it as a strategic decision as well, because the skills that come from choosing to be bridge builders makes our women and our organization more impactful and effective in the public sphere. And the last one is proactive. And I think that's pretty simple, and and it's pretty clear from what we do. We don't just talk about stuff, we go do it, right? We do a lot of talking, because we're nonpartisan and peaceful. There's a lot of behind the scenes back and forth, a very robust conversation about every position we take, everything we do. But ultimately, we are focused on doing things, actually, changing legislation and empowering women to do things rather than merely a discussion group.
Yeah, and I think if I could just add one thing to that, it is the idea that sometimes we confuse peacekeeping and peacemaking. And we have absolutely no interest in being peacekeepers, in the sense that we are not here to preserve the status quo or to avoid conflict. True peacemaking means you move towards conflict and injustice. If you want a peaceful society, then you have to, at a certain point, eradicate injustice insofar as it's possible. So we see peacemaking as actively moving towards problems and helping women to solve them in nonviolent ways, but nonetheless to solve problems, right? So that is really, when we say peacemaking, that's what we mean. It's an active, proactive, thoughtful, considered movement to eradicate justice and bring peace. Eradicate injustice, goodness, and bring peace.
How can folks get a hold of you and get more information, get engaged? Just share a way or two for people to get a hold of you.
So our website is a great place to start. It's mweg.org, mweg.org. We also have very active social media accounts. If you're on Instagram, that's probably the very best place to get a sense of who we are. We put a lot of work in there. And so you can find us on all social media platforms at Mormon WEG, WEG. That's our handle everywhere. So that's probably the best way to stay in touch. You can sign up for our email list. Absolutely. Even if you don't want to become a member, if you just want to kind of know what we're doing, but you don't want to commit to anything, like being membership, we welcome those. And
can I just add, Emma, that getting our email will give you access to things like calls to action. So you can participate as a citizen to support initiatives, independently of MWEG, by using our calls to action.
Yeah, our calls to action don't necessarily link back to MWEG. It doesn't say in there, I'm a member of MWEG. You can write whatever you want. So we hope that the general public will use our tool.
Beautiful. This has been an amazing way to have this conversation and truly give some perspective as we are entering a political cycle. And even for those women who are not living in the United States, it's good insight, information, and approach to model in their own communities for their own empowerment and their own journey of embracing their power. So thank you so much, ladies, Emma and Jennifer. This has been a wonderful, wonderful, heartwarming conversation to me and Robin, because we are women who believe in empowering other women, and we believe in democracy with justice. So as I bring this to a close, I want to reiterate the message that both Emma and Jennifer have shared with us today. Peacemaking is not about maintaining the status quo. Identify the points of conflict, address them, make sure that we're doing it thoughtfully in the name of Lady Justice. And in a just world, we truly can build a democracy that behooves all of us, and all of us includes all the women of this world who truly bring life into this world and keep humanity sustainable. So go out there, ladies, and be the change, embrace your power, and know that regardless of what culture, what society, what faith you come from, as long as you have an open mind, there are resources out there and women out there who are going to work with you and collaborate with you. So let's go make it happen.